I'm your host, and welcome back to No Nonsense Psychiatry, where we take a practical look at the mental health landscape. Have you ever scrolled social media and felt that sudden, sharp spike of anger? That feeling that your values and your identity or your sense of worth have been directly attacked? That, in essence, is what is meant by being offended. And an emotional defense mechanism that signals a psychological boundary and it's been crossed. In this episode 85, I'm Offended, we're exploring why so many people appear to be disproportionately sensitive today. We dissect those triggers and show how they range from a violation of core values to a simple misinterpretation or intent due to that kind of lack of context. Lack of context is kind of a familiar theme in digital communication, isn't it? Crucially, we'll discuss the severe mental health costs of taking constant offence, and we'll explain how frequent outbursts or outrages fuels chronic stress and keeps your brain in a higher alert, hypervigilant state, and that leads to emotional exhaustion and impaired relationships. Who would have thought? The good news is, though, is that you can train your brain to reduce this defensive reaction, and we'll give you 3 practical strategies, we're back to 3 this week, to improve your resilience and your tolerance, including how to shift from the interpretation to intent, and how to define and hold your non-negotiable core. So creating a psychological firewall, really, against the daily noise of daily slights. And it's time to stop letting external opinions control your internal peace, okay? Let's learn how to choose resilience over reaction. And the perception that people get disproportionately offended more often in the current age is complex. And this is stemming from a combination of social changes, communication shifts, and psychological factors that are magnified by digital platforms. And this amplification effect of social media, this is the primary reason for the perception of increased offence in the way modern technology exposes and amplifies reactions that were once quite private. Visibility and scale. So social media platforms allow every comment, opinion and emotion reaction to be broadcasted instantly to a potential global audience. So what used to be an argument between just 2 people in a room now becomes a viral public debate. The outrage economy. Digital platforms are built on engagement. Content like elicits our strong emotional reactions, and especially outrage or offence. And this drives more clicks, more shares and more comments. This algorithmic preference incentivizes both the expression of offensive content and the robust, often disproportionate reaction to it. And this lack of context, digital communication strips away the non-verbal cues, tone, body language, facial expressions. And this makes comments highly susceptible to misinterpretation, doesn't it? And this is leading to people to fill in the blanks with negative assumptions, thus fueling the offence. So the changing landscape of identity and values in modern society is undergoing rapid shifts, right? And what constitutes acceptable language and behaviour, particularly concerning identity. Expanded identity awareness, and this increases the visibility and validation to marginalised identities, i.e. racial, gender, sexual, disability. As these groups assert their rights to respect and recognition, they become more vocal about language and action that feels invalidating, abusive and harmful. And this is often misinterpreted by historical dominant groups as new or excessively sensitive. The moral ground standing, obviously, in an increasingly visible world, some individuals use the act of taking offence or publicly expressing outrage on behalf of offended group and to signal their own virtue or moral superiority to their peers. A form of social signalling, really. And the psychological and cognitive factors underlying psychological mechanisms also contribute to the phenomenon of low tolerance for discomfort. And in some segments of society, there is a perceived reduction in psychological resilience or heightened focus on avoiding emotional discomfort. When a differing opinion or perceived slight causes distress, the reaction is to classify the source as offensive to demand its removal. Confirmation bias and filter bubbles. So people increasingly consume content and interact with others who share their beliefs. And when they counter or encounter opposing or challenging views, the cognitive shock is greater, leading to more intense offensive reaction than if it were regularly exposed to diverse perspectives. People often get offended because their values, beliefs and identity or sense of self-worth has been perceived as challenged, attacked or violated by a comment, an action or even behaviour. An offence is essentially an emotion that is a reaction that signals a psychological boundary that has been crossed. And this reaction is highly subjective and rooted in the individual's psychological constructs as well. So the psychological triggers of offence, and these are the feelings of being offended, often raises from one or more or these core psychological triggers. Violations in core values. Every person holds certain values, i.e. honesty, respect, justice, or beliefs, political, moral or religious, as fundamentally true and important to them. When someone's actions or words directly contradict, mock or dismiss these core values, it's perceived not just as a disagreement, but as an attack on the foundational principles that person lives by. So you get this threat to identity and group belonging, and identifying is often tied to groups, right? That's where you mainly get identities. You know, I'm a Man United supporter. I support Manchester United. That's my identity, or part of my identity anyway. So you've got gender, nationality, professionally, or as I said, community. An attack on a group feels like an attack on the self. So the trigger, if the comment is generalized or it's discriminatory or stereotyped as a group someone identifies with, this person feels personally invalidated or marginalized, and this activates this deep-seated need for belonging and social validation. That feeling of being disrespected often centers on perceived lack of difference or acknowledgement of a person's status or inherent worth. And the triggers are ignoring somebody, interrupting them, criticizing them in public, or using condescending language. Signals a lack of respect, doesn't it? And the offence reaction is emotional defence against this perceived diminishment of status. The misinterpretation and attribution is that sometimes offence is due to a misunderstanding of intent, often filtered through past negative experience. And the trigger is that the human brain tends to attribute negative intent to ambiguous actions when a person who is already feeling stressed, anxious or insecure. A neutral comment, why are you doing it that way, might be filtered as a hostile criticism. You're doing it wrong because you're incompetent. Offence versus disagreement. It's helpful to distinguish between mere disagreement and taking offence, isn't it? Disagreement is intellectual difference. Yeah, I disagree with your argument on taxes. This is a cognitive response. Offence is an emotional and personal reaction. Your comment about people who pay taxes is insulting to my integrity. And this signals that the issue has been taken personally and threatens the self. So in short, people get offended because of a powerful emotional defence mechanism intended to protect them and their deeply held beliefs, their social standing and their personal identity from perceived external threats. And the psychological impact of offence is that the mental health consequences of being frequently offended stem to how the brain processes and perceived threat. Chronic stress, chronic anxiety. When you feel offended, your brain perceives a social threat, a challenge to your identity or status, and this triggers the fight or flight response. The physiological stress is that your body releases cortisone, the stress hormone, and adrenaline. And this happens repeatedly, and it leads to chronic low-grade stress, which is a major contribution to anxiety disorder and high blood pressure. Hypervigilant, frequently offence trains your brain to be constantly scanning for the environment for the next potential threat, leading to this hypervigilance, this state of constant alertness that fuels anxiety. When it impacts on relationships and isolation, offence often creates distance and conflict, which harms social well-being. You get that social withdrawal. To avoid being offended, a person might start limiting their interactions or retreat into echo chambers. And this isolation is one of the strongest predictors of poor mental health outcomes, including depression. It damages trust, so frequently offence makes it difficult to maintain trust, and as the individual assumes malicious intent in ambiguous situations, and the healthy relationship relies on the ability to give people the benefit of the doubt, which becomes difficult when one is easily offended. Reducing psychological resilience and fragility. So this tendency to take frequent offence can limit one's ability to cope with normal life friction. By constantly defining one's emotional state based on the actions of others, "You've made me offended," the individual places control over their feelings outside of themselves, and this external locus of control leaves them feeling powerless and vulnerable. And then, of course, the emotional exhaustion. So repeatedly reprocessing and reacting the perceived insults or challenges is mentally exhausting. It's diverting all that cognitive resources away from productive tasks and critical thinking that you would normally do. And in essence, a high tendency to feel offended creates this psychological environment defined by stress, conflict, and self-protection, which is severely compromising your long-term mental health. So by reducing the tendency to be offended is desirable because it significantly improves your mental health. It enhances your relationships and it increases your psychological resilience. What is there not to like about that? In short, mental health, it reduces chronic stress and anxiety by preventing the constant entity entering the fight or flight state over perceived slights. It helps you maintain an internal locus of control, meaning your emotional state is determined by your choices, not by unpredictable actions of others. And your relationship, it fosters better communication and trust, allowing you to assume positive intent and avoid unnecessary conflict or social isolations. Improving resilience and tolerance to reduce the feelings of being offended involves actively adjusting both your cognitive filters, how you interpret events, and your emotional regulation, how you manage the resulting feeling. Here are 3 practical strategies to focus on these areas. The first being shift from interpretation to intent. The benefit of the doubt. Most offences are triggered not by what someone said, but by the negative intent we attribute to those words or actions. Improving tolerance requires consciously separating the input from the intent. So the strategy is to assume positive or neutral intent. So when you feel the initial emotional spike of offence, immediately force yourself to consider 3 plausible alternatives and explanations for the person's behaviour that are not malicious, disrespectful or directing harm at you. Example, someone cuts you off mid-sentence. Offended interpretation is attack, isn't it? They think I'm saying I'm stupid and they don't respect me. The tolerant interpretation, the neutral positive, is they might be severely distracted by a crisis, or they were anxious about forgetting their point, or they didn't realise I was finished speaking. The resilience benefit is that this technique prevents your brain from automatically entering this threat response, and by choosing a neutral interpretation to conserve mental energy and avoid self-inflicted stress of personalising every interaction. So practice this centering the emotion distancing. So this involves stepping back from your immediate emotion reaction and viewing the situation objectively, thereby reducing the power of that event over you. So the strategy is decentering. It's not about me When something offensive happens, mentally place the comment in a speaker's side and not yours, and recognize that their opinion or insult or behavior is a reflection of their state or their background or their current struggle, and it's not a definitive statement about your value. Okay? The internal dialogue is that person is clearly having a difficult day, or has poor social skills, or feels trapped by their own rigid opinion. Their outburst is their problem, not my assessment. The resilience benefit is that by decentering, it helps you avoid internalizing the attack, and you see the insult as a piece of data about the speaker's dysfunction and not evidence of it's not evidence. Oh mate, I've lost myself. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Okay, yeah, sorry, yeah. It's not evidence of your own worthlessness, is it? And this emotional distance prevents the incident from draining your mental health reserves. It defines and holds your non-negotiable core. Offence that often arises when boundaries feel blurry, right? And by defining what truly matters, you disregard everything else as just noise. So the strategy is identifying your resilient zone to determine what characteristics, values, or actions are generally essential to your self-worth, i.e. your honesty, your commitment to family, your work ethic. And these are your non-negotiables, right? Everything else is open for debate and criticism, but your core values are your core values. So the assessment question. When something offensive happens, ask yourself, does this comment violate a fact about my non-negotiable core? If someone insults your haircut, a cosmetic preference, it doesn't violate your core, and you can choose to ignore it. If someone accuses you of being dishonest, which violates your core, you can address that specific behavior respectfully without letting your emotional defense derail you. So you win-win, don't you? The resilience benefit is that this creates this psychological firewall. It allows you to quickly dismiss that vast majority of critiques and slights, which are usually surface level, and focus all your energy on issues that generally require a boundary or a defense. Wow, what a series. Another long one today. So this brings us to the close of episode 85 on the psychology of being offended. And we've established that the high cost of constant offence is paid in chronic stress and anxiety, leading to you having hypervigilance and a breakdown of relationships. Who would want that? You know, why do we do that to ourselves? We also saw how outrage economy on social media magnifies the emotional reactions. And the solution isn't to stop caring. Yeah, I'm not saying don't care, but to increase your psychological resilience and tolerance for you, not for anybody else, for you. Yeah? Remember the 3 core strategies. Shift from interpretation to intent. Give people the benefit of the doubt and avoid immediately attributing sort of that negative motives. Yeah? Practice decentering. Recognize that the insult is often a reflection of the speaker's state and not a definitive statement about your worth. And define your non-negotiable core. Create a psychological firewall that you could defend what truly matters at the end of the day. Truly matters to you, not things that you take an interest in or a strong interest, the things that are your core. Reducing the tendency to be offended is about taking back of your emotional state, okay? Not anybody else's, it's you. I'm here for you. You choose your reaction, and in doing so, you improve your mental health and resilience. It's you. Thank you for tuning in to No Nonsense Psychiatry. Until the next time, choose perspective over reaction.